You might think that an entire module having to do with creating and managing AD users and computers would be perhaps one of the least interesting modules in the entire Pluralsight catalog. And in any other universe, you would probably be right. Thankfully, the new MCSE, this generation MCSE, gets us away from the traditional point and click that we're used to in the graphical user interface. Now, for a lot of the content we're talking about, getting away from the graphical user interface means we've got a lot more challenge. But here, when we're talking about AD users and computers, it actually means that we can go through a whole module of what would ordinarily be really boring stuff and turn it into some really powerful ways in which we can create automations. And in fact, here in this module, we are going to spend a very small period of time going through the actual in the GUI process of creating and copying and configuring and deleting users and computers in Active Directory. And I do this purely for completeness. I will show you how you can create a new user and or a new computer in Active Directory using both the ADAC and the ADUC, the Active Directory Users and Computers console and the Active Directory Administrative console, the new version that runs on Windows PowerShell. But that's not really the reason why we're here. I mean, any old person can go about creating users in AD. What we're here more so is in learning how to better automate that process. And there are a lot of ways in which you can accomplish that. The first of which is to just simply set up a template user in Active Directory and plug in all the default information that you would normally want to consider for a user, and then just simply copy that template to create the new user. This is in and of itself kind of an automation because you save yourself the extra task of having to re-enter information that you would have to do manually when you're creating every new user. Thanks to the use of wildcards in Active Directory users and computers, you can create these templates and just put wildcards in places where you need information to map to perhaps the user's logon name. We also have another item here where we're asked to talk about user rights. Now, we've already gone through user rights back in that last course when I explained how to set up rights and privileges using user rights assessment on a local machine. What I'd rather do, rather than just repeat that here, is to show you just the introductory bits about how you might deploy user rights using group policy. Now, I know we haven't gotten into group policy yet, and we've got a whole course on group policy that's upcoming, but I just want to show you that baked into group policy is a similar view of the local user rights assessment that you can use for deploying these user rights out globally to multiple machines at once. Now, this in no way is intended to take away from the thunder of the course upcoming on group policy, but at least it allows us to talk about something slightly different as it relates to user rights. Then once we've done that, let's dig even further into the command line focus for Active Directory and talk about the PowerShell and even some of the non-PowerShell tools that are out there to perform various tasks in a more automated way, like creating Active Directory accounts, like managing inactive and disabled accounts, and like performing bulk Active Directory operations. These three tasks here encompass a relatively large set of commands and commandlets in PowerShell that you could potentially bring to bear in order to do a large number of user and computer-oriented things. And in fact, some of the commands we'll talk about here are relatively new and actually kind of cool in the types of information that they can surface. There's one in particular I'll show you here called search AD account that was even relatively new to me that is just fantastic for helping you accomplish a task that in the old days was extremely hard to do. Then finally, we'll conclude with a look here at the offline domain join process. Occasionally, you have the situation where you have a machine that needs to join your Active Directory domain, but needs to do so in a way where there is no direct network connectivity between that machine and your domain controller. Now, when that happens, in the old days, there was no way really to get that machine on your AD domain. These days, you can kind of separate the process out into two different steps. The first step being the pre-provisioning of that computer account in Active Directory, the result of which you can transfer to the computer and then use its contents to complete the process on an offline basis with that machine that doesn't happen to be connected to your domain in any way. You may not necessarily find yourself performing this activity very often, but in those rare cases where you do need to get a machine online, well, an offline domain join solves a whole host of problems that would otherwise be insurmountable.